tell people I'm a cyclist, they usually do respond with curiosity, but often mixed with surprise. Just how does somebody who's blind ride a bike? And there is a simple approach: a tandem bicycle. The engineer in me really appreciates simple solutions to complex problems, which is good because 30-some years ago, when the bit of functional sight that I had was slowly disappearing, problems begging for solution were abundant. Most important then, I didn't want to stop having fun, and I love going fast on two wheels. Eventually, I figured that out. I raced on 3 Paralympic teams at the Atlanta, Sydney, and Athens Games. This is me with my pilot, Spencer Yates, racing the 4,000-meter pursuit in 1996. That, by the way, was our world record event. Years earlier, though, as a teenager, I had a much more pressing problem, just walking around at any speed. In the early stages of the degenerative genetic disease that I have, retinitis pigmentosa, the better the lighting, the better you can see. So, during my high school years, in daylight, I could ride a bike and even a motorcycle on my own. But in dim lighting, like the Centralia High Commons, bumping into furniture and other students was a normal part of my days. Awkward teenager. That was me. Dreading all the times that were supposed to be fun, like lunch and dances, but which were filled with unpredictably moving, shadowy blobs. Yet, I kept telling myself, I am not blind. Obviously, I am more capable than that. I am smarter than that. I shunned that label, blind, and did what I could to hide my condition. By the time I started my engineering and music studies at Notre Dame, it was getting noticeably worse. One day back home from school, I was really happy to be riding my bike for the first time in months. And I swore I could see the edge of the road perfectly, but I rode into the ditch. That didn't just happen. So I got back on and tried riding a little slower, and it happened again and again. I ended up riding home at a snail's pace, and without telling anybody else, I told my bike goodbye. As luck would have it, only weeks later I found myself reluctantly attending a national convention for the blind. I had to go if I wanted to compete for one of the scholarships they were offering, and I did leave with scholarship money. But more importantly, I met people who convinced me to walk out using a tool of freedom and independence that only days earlier I had regarded as an embarrassing symbol of helplessness and pity: a long white cane. The environment in that convention was amazing because there, being blind was normal. Eyesight really was optional. And there I discovered and I discarded limits that I had unknowingly been letting my eyes and fears of blindness put on my life. After a week in that special place, adjusting to the outside world where no one had ever seen me carrying a white cane was not easy. Fortunately, my new connections in the blind community encouraged me to spend a summer at the Center for Blind Adults in Anchorage, where I learned everything from techniques for cooking and laundry to cane travel, braille, and computer screen readers. Naturally, as an engineering student, I was anxious to dig into technology, and it wasn't long before I was beta testing pre-releases of screen reader software. I had discovered my passion for assistive tech. And ever since, I've been part of a mission to make the world more accessible with better technology. And for the last 20 years, I've been fortunate to be able to have it as my profession. So, I count myself among the luckiest. Yes, the ovarian lottery handed me RP. But on top of opportunities to compete on the world stage and the joys of nurturing 2 children with my wife, my very livelihood is chasing my dreams of a world where disability does not limit lives by robbing such good luck from anyone. Some of you are developing genetic therapies and biomedical technologies that are steadily marching the human race toward a day when we can modify the functionality of any part of the body, limbs, eyes, even brains. And when that day comes, disability as we now know it will no longer exist. My mission job, on the other hand, are to help people design the world in such a way that hands, ears, eyes, and a variety of other human features are nice, but not necessary. So anyone can live, work, and play regardless of where their body falls on the spectrum of human abilities. This is the field of accessibility. Broadly speaking, then, we have two technological approaches to removing barriers posed by disability. A biomedical approach, where we re-engineer ourselves, and an accessibility approach, where we re-engineer our environments. For now, engineering our education and work environments to be accessible is necessary to support the employment of people with disabilities. And even in the US, where accessibility is relatively advanced, this does not happen enough. 16 to 64-year-olds who are legally blind participate in the workforce at a rate of 36%. That is less than half the overall participation rate. Considering the importance of meaningful work to basic human dignity and societal health, this is untenable. Of course, environmental accessibility is not the only barrier. In fact, the root causes of most limitations experienced by people with disabilities are social and cultural. That's why so many people are surprised to learn that I've raised bikes or I can walk down the street independently, well, on the sidewalk, of course. But among people who are blind and living well, there is nothing surprising about the way that I live. That's one of the reasons why beneficial connections are so especially vital to the success of people with disabilities. My life has been made possible by connections. Connections with successful blind professionals who were meaningfully contributing to society. Connections with elite cyclists who shared my dreams of championship rather than other people's fears of blindness. If you're blind, you live in a long tail. But if you're blind and pursuing your dreams, you live in a long tail of a long tail, further reducing the likelihood that people who would most benefit from connections can make them. This is acutely true in cultures where disability remains a life sentence to some form of sweatshop or nursing home. This is where I see limitless possibilities for progress towards healthier societies with the combination of advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and online social networks. These technologies can both foster connections and positively influence cultural expectations, but only if the paths to online communities can be traversed with any disability. Unfortunately, for many people, they remain littered with barriers. We do not yet have widely available technologies that can enable anyone to connect with anyone, regardless of their physical abilities, their language, technical skills, and financial resources. Even as a well-equipped expert, I encounter a whole slew of accessibility barriers every day that I go online. And the day that I opened my Facebook account back in 2009 was no different. As an accessibility specialist, I recognize most of the problems as readily solvable. But there is one that stood out as potentially intractable, at least at the scale of Facebook. I was dismayed by how often people communicate with nothing more than a picture or a meme. Well, this is a really natural form of communications, and it obviously says thousands of words. It inadvertently excludes some of us from conversation. And since using Facebook on a phone with a camera has become the norm, not surprisingly, visual communications have become more and more dominant. Now, more than 2 billion photos are shared across Facebook every single day. We simply cannot expect everyone to get excited about translating all their beautiful rapid-fire visual communications into words. After all, part of their appeal is ease and efficiency. However, we can expect machines, intelligent machines, to do it, and they will do it without getting tired or annoyed. Now, the machines generated descriptions are not yet as rich as what a person could provide. We're still in the early days. But even when they're a little bit cryptic, they still sometimes can get the point across. I'll show you what I mean. I have a video of a screen reader for the blind reading a Facebook post, and the post includes a picture with a computer-generated description. While you're watching, listen for the words "image may contain." They mark the beginning of the computer-generated description.
Judy Kelly, March 1st, 2016. Friends. Just the usual day at culinary school. Photo. Image may contain fire, indoor, and text.
This is just one way that people specializing in machine vision and other forms of AI are making all kinds of disability barrier-burning tech possible. Another that's well on its way is autonomous vehicles. One of the top factors influencing my family's choice of home address, just like for a lot of other people who are not able to drive, is mobility. I want safe pedestrian access to important services and community features like schools. And unfortunately, the safest, most convenient locations are not typically the most affordable. Another constraint, if you're employed, you need your home to be at one end of a safe and accessible commute, which can affect your professional mobility. And what if you want to be the kind of parent who takes your kids to piano lessons, theater classes, and bike races? For people with disabilities, autonomous vehicles will unravel this restricting web of dependencies, opening up previously unimagined possibilities, just like automobiles have been doing for most people for decades. Such massive shifts in the ability of our built environment to accommodate an ever-widening range of human abilities is increasingly common as our technologies get smarter and more flexible. Sometimes these shifts are surprisingly unanticipated. Remember phones that had physical keyboards? You know, the kind with buttons, and you touch the button, you could feel the button and even type without looking at it? Well, imagine what happened in the blind community back in 2007 when Apple introduced a phone with no physical keyboard, nothing tactile. And they proudly proclaimed, "This is the way of the future." Perhaps that looked like a bright future to some, but the blind community was terrified. Touch screens were already a blight, ruining everything from ovens to washers, and now Apple seemed intent on ruining another perfectly good technology, which, by the way, had already been proving itself particularly liberating to blind people. And with the dynamically shifting content that's on iPhone screens, we could not make them accessible with the kind of stick-on tactile dots that some of us put on our microwaves. So, for 2 years, as the popularity of the iPhone was just exploding, fear in the blind community was brewing. It felt like we were getting jailed into a room of smooth glass. But Apple was quietly reimagining what is possible. They were developing the first touchscreen reader. Initially, it was lauded by only a few and greeted with skepticism by most of us. We just doubted that it could ever be as useful and efficient as a phone with a physical set of keys. Shockingly, within a few short years, it became difficult to find a blind person who either did not have or did not want an iPhone. In fact, many will tell you it is the most life-changing technology they have ever experienced. Today, touchscreen readers are commonplace, and blind people are using all kinds of smartphones for everything from reading their currency, mail, and books to navigating both their physical and online worlds. But that fear that Apple triggered in the blind community, that once again, the march of technology was widening the gap between what blind people could do and what others could do, was understandable. It is extremely rare that a hot new technology hits the streets without increasing the disability productivity gap. This prevailing lack of attention to accessibility naturally leads many people with disabilities to fear they are unwelcome, less valued, and less capable. My dream is a world where the whole of society just takes it for granted. People with disabilities are as important as and contribute as much as anyone else. And I believe one of the building blocks is a connected world where anyone with a disability anywhere can easily make beneficial connections and thus has power to build community that can change society. But for accessibility to be that pervasive requires developing technologies that are much, much simpler, more affordable, smarter, and more malleable than anything that we have today. That means tapping even more of the potential of technologies like machine vision, machine learning, natural language processing, and, for some situations, even breakthroughs in brain interfaces. Today's technologists are already experimenting with intelligent eyeglasses that can help blind people understand the world around them, and prosthetics that amputees can control with their thoughts. As our nascent technologies mature, there is one thing that I am hoping I will not need my mind-controlled robotic assistant to do: guide me around. That's because some of you will have already given me bionic vision. No matter how our biomedical and accessibility engineering paths converge, there's one thing I'm pretty sure about. Advancing technologies will make everyday life for all people with disabilities as fruitful and convenient as it is for anyone else. So regardless of what we're working on in the fields of medicine, genetics, biomedical engineering, or accessibility engineering, advancing and ethically applying technologies such as artificial intelligence to our work is a key to one thing for which we are all striving: a society that is healthier because all people can participate and everyone feels they matter, because they do. We all do.